Detroit was a city with a past steeped in industrial glory, but it also held secrets in its decaying structures. The abandoned car factory on the outskirts of town was one such secret, a looming, rusting monument to a bygone era. The factory, once a bustling hub of activity, now stood silent and foreboding, its windows broken and its walls covered in graffiti. Weeds and wild grass had claimed the cracked asphalt, and the smell of rust and decay permeated the air. It was a place that had seen better days, and now it was a place of whispers and shadows. According to local legend, the factory was haunted by the spirit of a worker named Jacob Turner, brutally murdered there in the late 1970s. Jacob was a man who had known too much about the corrupt dealings of the factory's management. He had been a diligent worker, respected by his peers, but he had stumbled upon something he shouldn't have. Evidence of illegal activities, dangerous working conditions, and embezzlement. Determined to do the right thing, Jacob had planned to expose the truth, but before he could, he was silenced forever. His body was found in a vat of molten metal, and his death was ruled an accident. However, rumors persisted that Jacob's death was no accident, but a murder, orchestrated to keep him quiet. Now it was said that his restless spirit wandered the factory, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to enter. Detective Lisa Marshall was no stranger to urban legends. She had seen her share of cold cases and unsolved mysteries in her 15 years with the Detroit Police Department. She was known for her keen intuition and tenacity, qualities that had helped her crack many difficult cases. But when a group of friends went missing after deciding to explore the factory, the legend of Jacob Turner became more than just a ghost story. Lisa was assigned to the case, tasked with unraveling the mystery of their disappearance. The missing friends were a tight-knit circle of thrill-seekers, always looking for the next adrenaline rush. Urban exploration had been their latest obsession, and the factory was their most daring target yet. The group consisted of 5 individuals: Mark, the adventurous leader; Sarah, the skeptic with a passion for photography; Alex, the history buff; Jenny, the horror enthusiast; and Tom, the tech-savvy hacker. Together they had ventured into the factory one fateful night, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of excitement. Detective Lisa Marshall sat at her desk, the glow of her computer screen illuminating the dimly lit office. The details of the missing friends' last moments weighed heavily on her mind. She reviewed their social media profiles, their messages, and their last known whereabouts. The factory loomed large in every piece of evidence, a constant reminder of the mystery she needed to solve. She decided to start her investigation by talking to the people who knew the missing friends best. Lisa first visited Mark's parents. They lived in a modest home in a quiet suburb, their faces etched with worry. Mark's mother clutched a photo of her son, her eyes red from crying. "Mark's always been a thrill-seeker," she said, her voice trembling. "But he's a good boy. He wouldn't just disappear without a word." Next, Lisa met Sarah's brother at a coffee shop. He showed her Sarah's latest photographs, eerie shots of abandoned buildings and desolate landscapes. "She had a knack for finding beauty in decay," he said, handing Lisa the photo album. "But she also had a fascination with the supernatural. That factory was her idea." Alex's friends gathered at their favorite bar, reminiscing about his passion for history. He loved uncovering hidden stories, one friend said, raising his glass. The factory was like a treasure trove for him. He talked about it for weeks before they went. Jenny's roommate welcomed Lisa into their apartment, filled with horror movie posters and spooky memorabilia. Jenny was obsessed with haunted places, she said, showing Lisa a collection of horror novels. The factory was supposed to be the ultimate scare for her. She couldn't wait to explore it. Finally, Lisa visited Tom's workplace, a sleek tech startup downtown. His colleagues described him as a genius with gadgets. Tom could hack into anything, one coworker said, demonstrating a makeshift surveillance setup Tom had left behind. He rigged cameras and motion sensors to capture everything. If something happened in that factory, Tom would have recorded it. With each interview, Lisa pieced together a clearer picture of the group's dynamics and their motivations for entering the factory. Armed with this information, she decided it was time to visit the factory herself. The building stood like a fortress, its rusty exterior barely hinting at the secrets within. As Lisa approached, she felt a shiver of anticipation mixed with dread. The factory's main gate was padlocked, but Lisa found a gap in the fence where the friends had likely entered. She squeezed through, feeling a rush of cold air as she stepped onto the factory grounds. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of metal and the distant sound of dripping water. Lisa's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a maze of debris and decaying machinery. She ventured into the main building, her footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The air was thick with the smell of rust and mildew. As she explored, she found the friends' abandoned belongings, a backpack with Mark's initials, a flashlight with Sarah's fingerprints, Alex's notebook filled with sketches, Jenny's horror novel, and Tom's camera. Each item told a story of their last moments, of excitement turning to fear. Lisa picked up Tom's camera, her hands trembling. She turned it on and began to review the footage. The early videos were filled with laughter and banter, the friends exploring the factory with wide-eyed curiosity. But as the night progressed, the tone changed. Shadows flickered in the background, strange noises echoed through the halls, and the friends' voices grew tense. The final video sent chills down Lisa's spine. The camera shook violently as Tom ran through the factory, his breath heavy with panic. He turned a corner and the screen went black. The last sound was a blood-curdling scream, followed by silence. Lisa's heart pounded as she replayed the video, trying to make sense of the chaos. Determined to find answers, Lisa delved deeper into the factory. She followed the path the friends had taken, her flashlight flickering as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors. She felt an oppressive presence, as if the factory itself was watching her. The temperature dropped suddenly, and Lisa shivered despite her thick coat. In a forgotten corner of the factory, she found a hidden room. The door was heavy and rusted, but she managed to pry it open. Inside, she discovered old blueprints, employee records, and news articles about Jacob Turner's murder. The room was a makeshift office, abandoned in a hurry. Lisa carefully examined the documents, piecing together the factory's dark history. Jacob Turner had been a dedicated worker, but he had stumbled upon evidence of illegal activities, unsafe working conditions, embezzlement, and corruption. He had gathered enough proof to expose the factory's management, but before he could go public, he was silenced. His death was ruled an accident, but the documents in Lisa's hands told a different story. Jacob had been murdered to protect a dark secret. As Lisa read through the papers, she heard faint whispers echoing through the room. She turned, her flashlight revealing nothing but shadows. The air grew colder, and she felt a presence closing in on her. She knew she wasn't alone. Jacob's spirit was still here, seeking vengeance for his untimely death. Lisa's radio crackled to life, the static deafening in the silence. She tried to call for backup, but the signal was weak. She was on her own, trapped in the factory with a restless spirit. Determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Jacob's memory, she gathered the documents and prepared to leave. But as she stepped into the corridor, she saw a figure in the distance, a shadowy form that dissolved into thin air as she approached. Her heart raced as she realized she had encountered Jacob Turner's ghost. The factory seemed to shift around her, the walls closing in. Lisa knew she had to find a way out before it was too late. She retraced her steps, her flashlight flickering as the oppressive atmosphere grew more intense. The factory's secrets were slowly unraveling, but the danger was far from over. Lisa retraced her steps through the factory, her heart pounding as she approached the spot where she had seen the shadowy figure dissolve into thin air. The weight of the documents she had found in the hidden room felt heavy in her bag, but the knowledge they contained was invaluable. Every creak of the metal beams and every whisper of the wind through the broken windows heightened her senses. She knew she was not alone, and the oppressive atmosphere only grew thicker with each passing moment. Her flashlight flickered again, casting ghostly shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. She shook it, trying to steady the beam, but it continued to sputter. Lisa's breath formed small clouds in the cold air, and she rubbed her hands together, trying to stay warm. The temperature had dropped dramatically, and she felt a chill that went beyond the physical. Something was very wrong here. As she rounded a corner, she came upon a large open space that might have been the factory's main assembly area. Rusted conveyor belts and dilapidated machinery loomed in the darkness, and the smell of oil and decay was almost overpowering. Lisa's flashlight revealed more abandoned tools and equipment, remnants of a once thriving industry now left to rot. The silence was eerie, and she could almost hear the echoes of the factory workers who had toiled here decades ago. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a faint noise, a metallic clanging that reverberated through the cavernous space. Lisa froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. The sound grew louder, more insistent, as if something, or someone, was moving towards her. She scanned the area with her flashlight, her nerves on edge. Then she saw it, a shadow moving swiftly between the rusted machines. "Who's there?" Lisa called out, her voice echoing in the empty space. There was no response, only the continuing clanging. She took a deep breath and moved forward cautiously, her eyes straining to see through the darkness. As she approached the source of the noise, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a man, his features obscured by the darkness, but she could make out his tattered work clothes and the faint outline of his face. He stood motionless, watching her. Lisa's flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, the figure disappeared. Her heart racing, Lisa shone her flashlight around the area, trying to find the man. "Show yourself," she demanded, her voice trembling slightly. But there was no one there. The clanging had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in on her from all sides. Lisa's radio crackled to life again, the static hissing loudly. She tried to call for backup, but the signal was still weak. She felt a wave of frustration and fear wash over her. She was alone in this haunted factory, facing something she could barely comprehend. Then she felt it, a cold breeze that seemed to come from nowhere, chilling her to the bone. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she spun around, her flashlight sweeping the room. In the beam of light, she saw the figure again, closer this time. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow and filled with a deep sorrow. It was Jacob Turner. Lisa's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the ghostly figure. Jacob's mouth moved as if he were trying to speak, but no sound came out. She took a tentative step towards him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Jacob," she whispered, hoping to make contact with the spirit. The ghost's eyes met hers, and in that moment she felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Anger, sadness, and a deep, unrelenting need for justice. Jacob raised a hand, pointing to the far corner of the room, where a large metal door stood slightly ajar. Lisa understood the message. There was something important behind that door, something that could help her solve the mystery. With a final, sorrowful look, Jacob's figure dissolved into the shadows once more. Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. She approached the metal door, her flashlight illuminating the path. The door creaked loudly as she pushed it open, revealing a dark, narrow hallway lined with old lockers and workbenches. At the end of the hallway, Lisa found another room. This one was smaller, filled with filing cabinets and dusty papers. It looked like an office, perhaps where the factory's management had conducted their business. Her flashlight revealed a desk covered in documents, and she began to sift through them, hoping to find more clues. As she read through the papers, she discovered more evidence of the factory's corrupt practices, records of unsafe working conditions, embezzlement, and other illegal activities. It became clear that Jacob had been gathering this evidence before his untimely death. He had been close to exposing the truth, but someone had silenced him to protect their interests. Lisa felt a sense of urgency as she realized the importance of what she had found. She needed to get these documents to the authorities, to finally bring justice to Jacob Turner and the other workers who had suffered. But as she prepared to leave, she heard footsteps approaching. The factory seemed to come alive around her, the walls closing in as if trying to trap her. She turned to leave, but the hallway stretched endlessly before her, the exit seeming farther away than it should have been. Her flashlight flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to find a way out, to escape the factory and the vengeful spirit that haunted it. As she stumbled through the darkness, Lisa felt a cold hand brush against her arm. She spun around, but there was no one there. The factory seemed to be playing tricks on her, distorting her senses and her perception of reality. She knew she had to get out before it consumed her completely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw a faint light ahead. She rushed towards it, her heart pounding, and burst through the door into the cold night air. She collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, the weight of the documents heavy in her bag. Lisa knew she had uncovered something important, something that could finally bring justice to Jacob Turner. But she also knew that the factory held more secrets, and that the danger was far from over. She had to find a way to expose the truth and put Jacob's spirit to rest before the factory claimed more victims. Back at her apartment, Lisa spread the documents she had found on her dining table, her mind racing with possibilities. The files were yellowed with age, their edges frayed, but they held a wealth of information. There were detailed records of the factory's operations, financial ledgers, employee records, and most damning of all, evidence of embezzlement and unsafe working conditions. Jacob Turner had been meticulously gathering these documents to expose the corruption that ran deep within the factory's management. Lisa organized the papers into piles, separating the financial records from the safety reports and employee testimonies. The financial ledgers showed a clear pattern of money being siphoned off into private accounts, implicating several high-ranking managers. The safety reports were equally incriminating, detailing hazardous working conditions that had led to numerous accidents and even deaths. As she pored over the documents, Lisa found a notebook that appeared to belong to Jacob Turner. The pages were filled with his notes, detailing his findings and his plans to go public with the information. His handwriting was neat and precise, each entry a testament to his determination to seek justice. In one of the final entries, Jacob had written about a meeting he planned to have with a local journalist, hoping to share his findings and expose the corruption. Lisa's heart ached as she read Jacob's words, knowing that he had been silenced before he could fulfill his mission. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would continue Jacob's work and bring the truth to light. But first, she needed to understand the full scope of the conspiracy and identify everyone involved. The next day, Lisa headed to the Detroit Public Library, where she accessed the archives for more information about the factory and its history. She found old newspaper articles that corroborated the documents she had uncovered. The factory had been a major employer in Detroit, but it had also been plagued by accidents and allegations of mismanagement. The articles mentioned several lawsuits filed by injured workers, but most of these cases had been quietly settled out of court. Lisa also discovered that the factory had been owned by a conglomerate known as Hemlock Industries, a company with a history of shady dealings and corruption. The CEO at the time of Jacob's death was Richard Hemlock, a powerful and influential man with connections in high places. Richard had managed to avoid any direct implication in the factory's scandals, but Lisa suspected he had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Determined to find more concrete evidence, Lisa reached out to a retired journalist named Frank Mulligan. Frank had covered the factory extensively during his career and had written several exposés on its corrupt practices. They met at a quiet cafe where Lisa showed him the documents she had found. Frank's eyes widened as he flipped through the papers. "This is incredible," he said, his voice filled with admiration for Jacob's tenacity. "I remember hearing whispers about Jacob Turner's death being more than just an accident, but I could never prove it. These documents could finally bring justice to all those who suffered because of Hemlock Industries." Lisa nodded. "I need your help to make sure this information gets out. We need to expose everyone involved and make sure they're held accountable." Frank agreed to help, and together they devised a plan to publish a series of articles that would reveal the full extent of the factory's corruption. They decided to start with an article about Jacob Turner, highlighting his bravery and the evidence he had gathered. Frank would use his connections in the media to ensure the story reached a wide audience. As they worked on the articles, Lisa continued her investigation. She visited former factory workers, many of whom were still haunted by the accidents and injustices they had experienced. Their stories added depth and emotion to the articles, painting a vivid picture of the factory's dark history. One evening, as Lisa reviewed her notes, she received a call from an anonymous source. The voice on the other end was shaky and nervous. "I worked at the factory," the caller said. "I know things. Things that weren't in the documents you found. Meet me at the old factory tonight and I'll tell you everything." Lisa's instincts told her it could be a trap, but she couldn't ignore the possibility of uncovering more crucial information. She agreed to the meeting, making sure to inform Frank of her plans. As she prepared to leave, she armed herself with a flashlight, her sidearm, and a small voice recorder to capture the conversation. The factory was even more foreboding at night, its shadows deeper and its silence more oppressive. Lisa entered through the same gap in the fence, her flashlight casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. She made her way to the designated meeting spot, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. In the dim light, she saw a figure waiting for her. It was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and haunted eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Sam. I worked with Jacob. I know what really happened to him." Lisa listened intently as Sam recounted the events leading up to Jacob's death. "Jacob was determined to expose the corruption," Sam said. "He gathered all the evidence he could, but someone found out. The management sent a group of thugs to silence him. They cornered him in the factory and killed him, making it look like an accident. I saw everything, but I was too scared to speak out. They threatened me and my family." Tears welled up in Sam's eyes as he spoke. "I've lived with the guilt ever since. I should have done something, but I was too afraid. Now, with the documents you found, maybe Jacob can finally get the justice he deserves." Lisa thanked Sam for his courage and assured him that his testimony would be invaluable. She recorded their conversation, knowing it would provide crucial evidence to support the articles she and Frank were working on. As she prepared to leave, Sam handed her a small, worn envelope. "Jacob gave me this before he died," he said. "He told me to keep it safe. I think it's meant for you." Inside the envelope, Lisa found a photograph of Jacob with a handwritten note on the back. The note read, "To whoever finds this, continue the fight for justice. Don't let them silence the truth." With renewed determination, Lisa left the factory, knowing she was one step closer to exposing the full extent of the corruption and bringing justice to Jacob Turner. The documents, the testimonies, and Jacob's final message would ensure that the truth would be revealed, no matter the cost. Lisa knew she had uncovered something big. The documents, the testimonies from former workers, and Sam's first-hand account were all pieces of a puzzle that, once complete, would expose Hemlock Industries' corruption and bring justice to Jacob Turner. But she also knew that time was running out. The factory seemed to have a will of its own, and the vengeful spirit of Jacob Turner was growing more restless. She could feel his presence, urging her to hurry. Back at her apartment, Lisa prepared for the final phase of her investigation. She meticulously organized the documents and audio recordings, making sure everything was backed up and securely stored. She contacted Frank Mulligan and updated him on the latest developments. Frank was working tirelessly on the articles, ensuring they would make a powerful impact once published. As night fell, Lisa felt a growing sense of urgency. She knew she had to return to the factory one last time. There was one more piece of evidence she needed to find, something that would definitively prove Jacob had been murdered. She believed it was hidden somewhere in the factory, perhaps in the area where Jacob had been killed. With a deep breath, Lisa drove to the factory, her mind racing with thoughts of what she might find. The factory loomed in the distance, its dark silhouette a stark reminder of the danger she was walking into. She parked her car and approached the fence, squeezing through the gap once more. The night was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath her boots. As she entered the factory, Lisa felt the temperature drop again. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay. She turned on her flashlight and navigated the familiar corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew where she needed to go, the large open space that had once been the factory's main assembly area, where she had first encountered Jacob's ghost. The machinery and conveyor belts cast long, eerie shadows as Lisa made her way to the center of the room. She paused, listening for any signs of movement. The silence was oppressive, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She reached for her sidearm, keeping it ready as she continued her search. Then she saw it. A faint glow coming from a small office in the corner of the room. It was the same office where she had found the initial documents. She approached cautiously, her flashlight illuminating the doorway. As she stepped inside, she saw a figure hunched over a desk, bathed in the soft glow of an old desk lamp. "Jacob?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure turned, and Lisa's heart skipped a beat. It was Jacob Turner, his ghostly form more solid than before. His eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. He gestured to the desk where a dusty journal lay open. Lisa approached the desk, her hands trembling. The journal was filled with Jacob's notes, detailing his investigation into the factory's corruption. The final entry caught her eye. "They know. I have to hide the last piece of evidence. It will prove everything. If anyone finds this, please finish what I started." Beneath the journal, Lisa found a hidden compartment. She pried it open, revealing a small metal box. Inside the box was a tape recorder and a cassette labeled "Confession." Lisa's hands shook as she picked up the tape and placed it in the recorder. She pressed play and a voice crackled to life. "This is Richard Hemlock. If you're listening to this, then my secrets have been exposed. I ordered the death of Jacob Turner to protect my interests. He knew too much. His death was necessary to keep our operations running smoothly. But if this tape is found, it means I've failed. My empire will crumble, and justice will be served." Lisa's eyes widened as she listened to the damning confession. This was the final piece of evidence she needed. She turned to Jacob's ghost, who nodded solemnly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll make sure the world knows the truth." As she prepared to leave, the factory seemed to come alive around her. The walls groaned and the machinery roared to life. Lisa felt a cold hand grip her shoulder, and she spun around to see Jacob's ghost standing before her. His eyes were filled with gratitude, but also with urgency. "Go," his voice echoed in her mind. "Finish it." Lisa sprinted towards the exit, the tape recorder clutched tightly in her hand. The factory structure seemed to shift and change, as if trying to trap her. She stumbled through the dark corridors, her flashlight flickering as the oppressive atmosphere grew more intense. She could hear the whispers of the past, the voices of workers who had suffered and died within these walls. The next morning, Lisa met with Frank at his office. She handed him the tape recorder, her eyes filled with determination. "This is it," she said. "This is what we need to bring them down." Frank listened to the tape, his face pale with shock. "This is incredible," he said. "We need to publish this immediately. The world needs to know what happened." Over the next few days, Frank worked tirelessly to finalize the articles. The story of Jacob Turner, the brave whistleblower who had been silenced, was finally ready to be told. The evidence was overwhelming, and the public response was immediate. The articles went viral, sparking outrage and demands for justice. Richard Hemlock was arrested, and a full investigation was launched into Hemlock Industries. Former employees came forward with their own stories, adding to the mounting evidence of corruption and abuse. The factory's dark history was laid bare, and justice was finally served. As the dust settled, Lisa returned to the factory one last time. She stood at the entrance, the morning sun casting long shadows on the ground. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that Jacob Turner's spirit could finally rest. She whispered a silent thank you to him, feeling his presence fade away. The factory was still and silent once more, its secrets finally revealed. Lisa turned and walked away, ready to move forward, knowing she had fulfilled her promise to Jacob and brought justice to those who had been wronged.